Hello and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. I'm Aaron Porras, here with ILTV's Morning Briefing.
United States President Donald Trump has just met with Russian President Vladimir Putin at the Helsinki summit. While Trump's apparent endorsement of Putin at this summit is drawing some major flack back at home, even from GOP party leaders, there is someone who presumably comes out on top here, and that's Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. In fact, Israeli security was at the forefront of the Trump-Putin statements to the press, with both sides pledging a resolution to the growing threat on Israel's northern border with Syria. Speaking with journalists after the meeting, Trump promised that the leader of America's biggest arch-rival was committed to helping Israel, and that the man was personally a big fan of Prime Minister Netanyahu. This summit comes just a few days after Netanyahu met with Putin in Moscow to discuss Israeli security concerns as well. With Russia heavily involved in Syria for the last several years now, Putin has ostensibly overseen the flow of Iranian forces into the destabilized southern region. But many believe that a unified Netanyahu-Trump front has successfully convinced Putin to pull those proxy armies several dozen kilometers away from Israel's front door. For many Americans, however, this summit presented something of a disturbing conundrum. Trump seemed to defy his own intelligence agencies by agreeing with Putin's assertion that Russia was uninvolved in any attempts to sway the 2016 presidential election in his favor. And yet, just 3 days ago, Special Counsel Robert Mueller announced criminal indictments for 12 Russian operatives working directly under Russian military intelligence. They were charged with hacking democratic servers and actively working to influence the results of the election. American leaders across the aisle were stunned, to say the least, to hear Trump openly siding with perhaps America's biggest regional nemesis. Republican House Speaker Paul Ryan demanded that Trump, quote, appreciate that Russia is not our ally, end quote. Other Republicans called the president's words shameful, a historic low point, and a tragic mistake. Israel may indeed see the fruits of this high-stakes meeting, but in his home country, many will be expecting President Trump to offer some clarifications. We're still at least another 8 months away from the opening of Israel's new airport near Eilat, but the facility is already bracing to receive a flood of global tourists, and ultimately transform the southern city of Eilat into a new resort mecca. The airport's just completed its very first trial run, the landing of its inaugural commercial flight, which was greeted with cheers and celebration yesterday on the runway. Israeli Transportation Minister Israel Katz was on board Flight 883 to oversee the maiden landing for himself. The new airport was delayed by a few years of setbacks, but as you can see, the facilities are finally up and running. Right now, things are on track to open the airport to the public next March, and the Eilat Ramon Airport takes its name from Israel's first astronaut, Eilat Ramon, who tragically died in the 2003 Columbia Space Shuttle. His son Asaf Ramon met a similar fate 6 years later when his F-16 fighter crashed. The airport will honor their legacies by embracing the future and creating a new transportation hub for tourists all over the world. The clear skies, warm weather, and crisp beaches of Eilat are some of the best in the world. Low-cost carriers will have plenty of terminal space at the new airport, and ministry officials predict that the facilities can take in 2 million passengers a year, making this destination more than competitive with traditional vacation spots like Greece and Cyprus. Oh, and by the way, the city of Eilat is tax-free. If that doesn't get you racing to buy a ticket, then you don't know what you're missing. Last May, President Trump delivered on his promise to relocate the American embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. At the time, an existing U.S. consulate building was merely redesigned in order to formally render services as a functioning embassy, but the plan was always to build a new embassy from scratch in the heart of Jerusalem. Well, the budget for that endeavor has just come together, and the cost is more than 100 times its original estimate. Building costs were originally announced by Trump himself last March. At the time, the former real estate tycoon told reporters that the plan called for $1 billion, but that he'd found a way to do it for $250,000. Trump later expanded that figure to just $400,000, but now a Maryland firm has just sealed a government contract to begin the plans in a tender worth over $21 million. Needless to say, that's a bit more than initially estimated, 100 times more actually. Now, there's still no word yet on when construction would begin, but word from the Trump administration is that the government will purchase a new facility and convert it into a permanent embassy complex. But given the price tag, the White House is clearly ready to lay down big bucks in order to deliver on the Jerusalem embassy promise. Last month, a Turkish national who was in Israel as a tourist was arrested in Ben Gurion Airport and charged with funneling money to Hamas. The woman's attorneys have denied the claims, but now, through an apparent plea deal, she seems to have been released. Though her indictments are still on file, the suspect has now been released from prison and allowed to return back to Turkey. The arrest of Ebru Özkan was yet another example of strained tensions between Turkey and Israel. Though Turkish tourists do still come to Israel primarily to visit the Muslim sites in Jerusalem, the two nations' political ties have readily decayed in recent years. For example, though most countries list Hamas as a terror organization, Turkey does not. Özkan was accused of trying to smuggle money and packages to Hamas operatives. If prosecuted, this case would have posed quite a danger to what little ties Israel and Turkey have left. But in what seems to be an undisclosed plea agreement, Özkan's passport was returned to her following several weeks of incarceration. The suspicion here is that her indictment may soon be dropped as well.
That's all for now. I'm Aaron Porras, and see you later with our main daily broadcast from Israel at 2 p.m. Eastern Time.